Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. It is Ellie from Ellie's Book Club, and in today's video I am going to be doing a beginner's guide to Stephen King. So I picked out 10 of the books that I would personally recommend to readers who are new to Stephen King. So let's just jump right into it. So the first book that I would recommend to a beginner Stephen King reader is Carrie, because this is the first book that he ever published, and it does a really good job demonstrating character development, in my opinion. It's about this girl who has the power to control things with her mind, basically, and she gets bullied in school. She's kind of like the nerd that nobody likes. She has an insane mother who constantly puts her beliefs before anybody else, and it's just crazy, and like, it truly does a good job representing how people can really get pushed beyond their limits in such a negative way. And this is a classic King. Like, this is the first book he ever published, so I definitely recommend this one. It is a small read, and any reader can read something like this in my opinion, but I definitely recommend this one. Also, guys, just FYI, these are in no particular order. Like, I would recommend all of these books equally to a beginner Stephen King reader, so just so you know. Next, we have The Shining. I know that a lot of people read this as their first Stephen King book and they loved it. This was one of the few that I read near the beginning of when I first discovered Stephen King, and it's so incredibly scary. I really love this book so much, and I recommend this to beginner Stephen King readers just because this is one of his most famous works, and there's a lot I could say about The Shining. It's about this family, the Torrance family. They move to the Stanley Hotel, which is located in Estes Park, Colorado, and Jack Torrance, who is the father of the family, he becomes the hotel caretaker for the winter, and throughout the whole time the hotel is closed, and there is a part in the story when they get snowed in. They literally cannot leave the hotel at all for weeks because there's packed snow on the ground, and Jack Torrance, he lets the loneliness get to him, and there's a lot of stuff that happens that makes this book phenomenal. I would recommend this if you're starting out with Stephen King, maybe as like one of the very first books that you read. The next book I would recommend to a beginner Stephen King reader is Salem's Lot. This is actually Stephen King's favorite book that he has ever written, and I understand why. I reread this back in October for a Halloween-themed readathon that I did, and I love this book so much. It is so scary. If you're someone who's looking for something that's like absolutely chilling, then this is the one that you should read. I also recommend that you start out with this one because a lot of his later books have a lot of Salem's Lot references, and a lot of his short stories are based on Salem's Lot, so in order to understand a lot of his books, you kind of have to read this one. But basically, it's about this guy named Ben Mears, and he is a famous author, and he goes to Jerusalem's Lot because he kind of hears that there's like a lot of suspicious things going on in that town, and the whole town is eventually infested with vampires, and there's a lot of sad parts in this. The character development with some of the characters is so crazy. It's just so good. I love this book, and I definitely think that a beginner Stephen King reader should read this one for sure. Next we have The Green Mile. This one is a very easy read. I recommend this to beginner Stephen King readers, especially for those of you who aren't really looking to read something that's scary. This is not really that scary at all. It's about this guy named Coffee, and he befriends a prison guard once he's accused of falsely committing a crime, and he has the power to heal people regardless of the illness or an injury or whatever. He can heal them. However, he has to heal them within a certain amount of time if they are dying. And I love the mouse so much. The mouse is so cute. If you're not really looking for too much horror, then I definitely recommend this. This is a fairly short read, and I read it within like a week, so I definitely recommend this one. The next one that I recommend to a beginner Stephen King reader is Misery. This book is pretty short, and it follows an author named Paul Sheldon, and he goes to Colorado to write his last book in the Misery series. And he then stumbles across his biggest fan, and she takes him in after he gets into a car accident, and she cares for him because she used to be a nurse at a hospital. But she kind of captures him and does all these crazy things to him, and she forces him to write a special book for her. And when things don't go her way, she does a lot of crazy things. I definitely recommend this, especially if you yourself are a writer, because it follows Paul Sheldon's writing process when writing the last book in his series. And I loved this book so much. There was one scene where I was like, like seriously, it's terrifying, it's gory, it's everything you could ever want in a horror novel. And I think Annie, the villain, she is absolutely evil and vile. Like, I can't even describe how terrifying this woman truly is, but if you want something scary, then this is definitely the one to go to. Next, we have The Long Walk. This one is not really that scary. It's more of just like a thriller, and I love this one. It's about these boys who sign up to go on the Long Walk, and basically what the Long Walk is, it's like a government kind of event, I guess. And I'm pretty sure there's 100 boys who participate in the Long Walk at first. However, there can only be one survivor in the end, and all the boys have to walk at minimum 5 miles an hour, and there is a certain range where you have to walk/run, and you cannot pass the range, and you also cannot go under the range. I don't exactly remember what the range was. I just know that you have to walk at least 5 miles per hour, and if you fail to do so, you get 3 warnings, and if you fail to accept the 3rd warning and you still don't meet the requirements, then the government will pretty much shoot you. That's what happens to the characters in here. Like, that's what happens to some of the boys in this book, and it's so good. Like, it definitely keeps you on the edge of your seat. And Stephen King actually originally wrote this book, I think, when he was 17 years old, and I find that so impressive. I'm almost 21 years old and I haven't written a book yet, but I really enjoyed this book. This is a lot of people's favorites, and I can see why. This is definitely within my top 10, and I love this book so much. Next is Pet Sematary. I definitely recommend this one because this is arguably one of his most terrifying works. It's fairly short, it's a quick, easy read, but it's so terrifying. And I love the moral of this story, which is grief comes in many different forms, and grief can be so unbearable sometimes. And life gets so hard when you keep losing the people and things that you love. And that's exactly what the Creed family goes through with this book. And let me just say, when people die, leave them dead. It's for the best, but it's so chilling. It's absolutely terrifying. I remember I stayed up all night reading the last couple of chapters of this book because I was so terrified. So I recommend reading Pet Sematary. I might actually reread this book because I loved it so much. This was the second Stephen King book that I ever read, so I definitely recommend this for beginner Stephen King readers. Up next on this list, I have Christine. It is about a possessed car named Christine. This is one of Stephen King's classics, and I love this a lot. It's such an easy plot to understand. There's a huge character development with Arnie, who is the main character, and this book is so good. I honestly love the car's background story. It's actually quite interesting what happened with the car before the car was owned by Arnie. And Arnie's best friend, oh my gosh, he is such an amazing character. I love all the characters so much. I even love the bullies. I really highly recommend this book to beginner Stephen King readers because it's so easy to follow. It's such a fast-paced book, and it's one of his classics, and I don't know, there's just a lot to take in with this book, and it's amazing. Next, we have It. This is my favorite book of all time. This was actually the first book that I read of Stephen King's, so because it's my first read and I loved it, and it introduced me to all of these wonderful books, I think that any beginner Stephen King reader should read this book. It's so big, you could murder someone with this book. But it is about a killer clown named Pennywise, and he takes the form of these kids' fears, and he feeds off of their fears and tries to eat them, and because that's how he stays alive. Pennywise is like this entity that lives off of people's or children's fears. And pretty much these kids who have different disabilities or different unique characteristics, they all meet up and form a team called the Losers Club. There is Beverly, she's the girl, and this takes place in the 1950s when they're kids, and so, you know, girls were highly discriminated against back then. And then there's Mike Hanlon. He is a kid of different color, and of course he was discriminated as well back then, and so, you know, he joined the group because of that. Then there's Ben Hanscom. He is larger for his age, and he gets teased for his weight. And then there is Stanley Uris. He is Jewish, and he gets made fun of for his religion. Also, there is Eddie, and his mother kind of, you know, manipulates him into having him think that he has all of these illnesses when, you know, he really doesn't. He kind of falls into that group because he's bullied for constantly using his inhaler because he has asthma. Next, we have Bill Denbrough. He is kind of the leader of the Losers Club, and he is bullied because he has a really bad stutter, and that started when he was a kid, and it progressively got worse as the story goes on. But then when he's an adult and he's asked to go back to Derry, Maine, he forgets all about his stutter until he's back in Derry, Maine. So, I don't know, I really liked that aspect. And lastly, we have Richie Tozier. He's made fun of because of his big glasses, and he also kind of questions his sexuality a little bit, and he kind of makes fun of Henry Bowers, and Henry Bowers kind of makes fun of him back, and he joins the group eventually as well. Overall, I love this book with everything that I have. I have read it, I think, 3 times now. It's amazing, and it gets better every time I read it, because every single time I always notice something different. But I love this book. It's so creepy. If you are into clowns or pretty much anything terrifying, then please read this. Yes, it's big, but it's action-packed, and it's totally worth the read. The last book on this list is Mr. Mercedes. This is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy. I highly recommend this book to beginner Stephen King readers because this book is so different from the rest of his works. This is about a retired detective named Bill Hodges, and a few years ago he was on this case where this guy stole a Mercedes car, and the killer runs over all of these people at a job fair with the stolen Mercedes car. And Bill Hodges eventually retires, and the case was never solved. And then, out of the blue, the killer reaches out to Bill Hodges, and he's like, hey, like, you never found me, and, you know, just kind of teasing him a little bit. And then that makes Bill Hodges want to find him, and he has to find him before the town concert, before the bombing happens. This book is insanely intense. I was, like, literally holding on to the cover while reading this book as tightly as I possibly can. I was so eager to know what happens, and this book is so interesting. You see the killer's perspective as well as Bill Hodges' perspective, and I definitely recommend this to beginner readers. This is nothing like any of the other works of his that I have read, but I definitely recommend this if you're wanting something a little different and you don't really need to know anything about Stephen King to read this book. Alrighty guys, so those are all of my recommendations for any beginner Stephen King readers. If you have any questions, then please feel free to comment below and I will gladly answer them. And if you agree with my list, then please let me know. I really hope that I helped a lot of you out there who don't know where to begin with his works or how to get started. So I hope that this was really helpful to you guys. Alrighty guys, so that is the end of today's video. If you liked this video, then please like, subscribe, and turn on those post notifications. Bye!